going. Okay. Not a problem. It's fine. All right. Start. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Paul. I'm the principal of New Urban Concepts, and we are going to present today the City of Oviedo's mobility plan and mobility fee, and also discuss extraordinary circumstances. Today is April 23rd, 2024. This is a 9:30 a.m. workshop. We also have a workshop this evening at 6:30 p.m. In the same location in City Hall. It's also available streaming. All this information we present today will be available on the city's website also for viewing. And then there will be a link to a recorded portion of this presentation. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and commence. We are here today to discuss what's known as extraordinary circumstances. This is a requirement adopted by the Florida legislature in 2021. They amended the Impact Fee Act, which is Florida Statute 163-3180-01. As part of this act, they have limited increases in impact fees to 50% above the currently adopted rates. There's also another provision in statute that requires mobility fees to follow the same process as impact fees. Their calculations and methodologies are different, but in terms of advertisement, in terms of phasing and adoption, the processes are the same. If there is an increase in an individual rate for a mobility fee, it has to be phased in over 2 years if it's less than 25%. If the increase over the existing rates is between 25% and 50%, it needs to be phased in equal increments over a 4-year period. There's one exception if a local government makes a finding of extraordinary circumstances. If they develop a technical report for the fee, and they also document the findings, the date of that study cannot be more than 12 months old from the date of adoption. The technical report we'll be discussing today was prepared as of September 2023. That is less than 12 months old from where we are today, and also less than 12 months from the summer when it's the projected date for adoption. Statute requires that there's 2 public workshops that have to be advertised and held for the community. The first workshop is this morning at 9:30 a.m. The second is at 6:30 p.m. this evening. And finally, any vote for extraordinary circumstances will require a supermajority or 2/3 vote of the city council to approve extraordinary circumstances. This workshop and this evening's workshop have been posted and noticed on the City of Oviedo's website and also on the city's live stream for news events. This public workshop has also been noticed per the city's requirements for public workshops in the Orlando Sentinel. There is also a documented study that's going to go over everything that we're discussing today. It is called the 2045 Mobility Plan Mobility Fee Extraordinary Circumstances Study, dated April 2024. This is available from the city's planning department upon request. It documents the findings for extraordinary circumstance. It covers the data and analysis presented today. And it is based on the mobility plan and mobility fee technical report, which was developed in September of 2023, also available upon request from the city. So just in summary, and we'll go over these in more detail in the presentation today, these are the findings for the extraordinary circumstances for the city of Oviedo to move forward with the adoption of a mobility plan and a mobility fee. The intent of the mobility fee, consistent with the city's adopted comprehensive plan, is to replace its transportation impact fee and the county's mobility fee, as well as policies related to transportation concurrency. The first finding is that historically, since 1990, the city of Oviedo has grown faster than the state of Florida in terms of population. I've used the state of Florida as one of the metrics for extraordinary circumstances. There is no guidance in Florida statute. There is no documentation or minimum requirements. But one of the things that I found in many of my communities is the state of Florida is recognized throughout the country as having extraordinary growth. And if you've been growing faster than the state of Florida, you've had extraordinary growth in your community. We've also looked at, in the future, a mobility study area, which includes both the city and the surrounding communities or the surrounding areas of the city that may either annex into the city or that have development that's going to come and travel into the city over the next 22 years. Within that projection out to 2045, the mobility study area population is increasing as fast as the state of Florida. We also looked at the potential for traffic growth within that study area as well, and it's also projected to increase faster than the state of Florida. The city, as required by Florida statute, has developed a mobility plan. That mobility plan identifies future improvements in the city and the mobility study area to meet the increase in travel demand from new growth. So that's the city's current impact fee is what's known as a consumption-based fee. It's just based on the cost of capacity. The mobility fee is actually based on very specific projects and a very specific methodology, and it's a marked difference from the city's current transportation impact fee and the county's mobility fee. One of the other factors is that, and many members of the public have experienced this, there's been a significant increase in inflation. This has also impacted the cost of construction of roadways, sidewalks, bike lanes. There's documentation that's shown that since the COVID-19 pandemic, that inflation for construction costs has increased by more than 50%. One of the other findings, while most of the mobility fees have increased, the mobility fee does include programs for the city to develop that would provide for a reduced rate for affordable housing, for small retail businesses, and also mixed-use development. And finally, the streamlined mobility fee schedule is based on the most recent and localized data, and it does reflect changes in factors that we use to calculate fees that play into the extraordinary circumstances. And each one of these will be detailed in further as we go through this presentation. So the City of Oviedo's mobility plan and mobility fee is a vision over the next 22 years for how people are going to move both within the city and within the surrounding areas. The mobility fee itself is a simple, transparent way for new development to pay for its impact to the transportation system. A mobility fee, just like an impact fee, is not a tax on existing development. It is only assessed on brand new development that has an impact to the city's transportation system. And the mobility fee is different from the county's current, or the city's current fee, in that it does promote walking, bicycling, use of transit, micromobility devices such as scooters or potentially golf carts in the future, shared mobility such as Uber and Lyft, or should the city consider a bicycle share program. And the mobility plan also does recognize people are still going to drive their motor vehicles, and there is still going to be a need for both new roads and the widening of existing roads in the future. So this mobility fee covers all modes of transportation, not just walking and bicycling. These are the detailed steps in the technical report that was prepared by our firm. There's roughly 18 overall steps that go into developing a mobility plan and mobility fee. I'm not going to go through all these, but they are detailed and documented in the technical report. So the mobility plan itself features a number of improvements to on-street facilities, such as existing on-street bicycle lanes, and also introduces a potentially new concept of a multimodal lane. This is something that could accommodate a golf cart, an autonomous transit shuttle, or even a transit circulator within the city. The primary focus in terms of multimodal transportation, people walking, bicycling, using golf carts, using a scooter, for the city's mobility plan is to provide what are known as off-street facilities. These are roadways and improvements that are separated from the roadway travel lane, such as a multimodal way or a bicycle way, also known as a protected bicycle lane, a sidewalk, a shared use path, a multi-use trail, and then also what we're referring to as a multimodal way. This is an off-road facility that would allow for golf carts, for bikes, for scooters. And this is really a primary focus of the plan is most people feel safer bicycling outside of the actual place where vehicles are driving, and they do so on off-street facilities. So the mobility plan does include a number of these projects. The mobility plan itself is really an amalgamation of several different overall plans, the first of which is a streets plan, and this identifies both streets to be widened in the future, new roadways, and additional improvements in terms of connectivity. If you've been in the community, you realize that portions of State Road 426 or County Road 419 are currently being widened to 4 lanes. That improvement would extend eastward just to the west of Lockwood into the future. There's also proposals for extension of Slavia Road over to State Road 434. In addition, there are a number of other connectivity improvements to roadways such as Franklin, Geneva. Some of these projects are ongoing today. Some of these projects would occur in the future with new development, and each one of these is further detailed in the mobility plan. There's also a multimodal plan, which includes the shared use paths, trails, and bicycle facilities I was mentioning earlier. Some of these would be brand new facilities. Some of these would be replacing existing sidewalks with a shared use path at least 8 feet wide or potentially a trail up to 12 feet wide. And they are proposed throughout the city with a focus on connecting to the existing trail network that already exists within Oviedo. And this is just an example of the mobility plan and options for Alexandria Boulevard. Today it is a 4-lane undivided roadway with 5-foot sidewalks in the future, or today. In the future, the roadway could be narrowed to 2 lanes with on-street bicycle lanes. It could also be converted to have a center raised landscape median with both a protected bicycle lane and a shared use path. Or in the future, have a facility that would be adjacent to the roadways for golf carts and bikes, and then a wider sidewalk, which would be either a shared use path or a trail in the future. So the mobility plan projects, there's over 100 of them, provide flexibility as each one of these corridors go through further design, survey, and evaluation of existing right-of-way and utilities. There's going to need to be some changes or some flexibility in terms of how these projects are handled, and this is just one example of that on Alexandria Boulevard. Another project that is included in the mobility plan is to add the potential for an additional shared use pathway along Oviedo Boulevard from 419 all the way down to Mitchell Hammock. And these are just some different options that were included in the mobility plan for how you would add shared use paths to Oviedo Boulevard. Presently today, there is a sidewalk along the roadway and bicycles share the travel lane with motor vehicles. In the future, if there are shared use paths, it would be available to people walking, bicycling, and potentially, if the city elects to do so, golf carts as well. But that's something that will be evaluated further in the future. Mobility plan also includes a number of intersection projects at major roadways throughout the city, and each one of these is detailed in the technical report. There's also a proposal as new development, specifically commercial and office development along some of the major roads occurs, that there's connectivity between those uses, whether it be through existing parking lots or opening up existing access ways. These are not intended to be new roadways, but they are intended to promote connectivity between commercial developments along major roads in the city. The plan also identifies filling in gaps in sidewalks, so there will be sidewalks on both streets of a number of the major roadways within the city. The dark blue line are existing facilities, the light blue line are closing in the gaps in the sidewalk network. And finally, there are a number of projects that have been discussed and evaluated, some within the city, some within unincorporated areas that could annex in the future. And so the mobility plan includes a future planning considerations map. Each one of these projects has either some requirement to coordinate with another government body or neighborhood impacts that would have to be further discussed with the community, workshops held, and really the idea is these are potentially good projects from a pure mobility standpoint, but that's not the only thing that the city looks at. It also looks at environmental impact, neighborhood impact, business impact. So each one of these projects is something that the city may evaluate further in the future, but these are not adopted projects and not adopted as part of the mobility plan. And the mobility plan lastly includes several follow-on projects for the city to consider in terms of a bicycle master plan, a sidewalk master plan. These get into much more detail. The mobility fee itself and mobility plan are primarily focused on major roadways, arterials, and collectors, like a Chapman Road, a 434, and Oviedo Boulevard. But there are also a number of local streets within the city as well that have access to schools, need sidewalks or bicycle infrastructure. So some of the follow-on programs could be additional plans to address those. There's also a need to look at upgrading curb ramps so they're accessible to all members of the community, and then also adopting or considering a Vision Zero action plan to make the community safer for all users. Extraordinary circumstances. The first finding was looking at the growth in population historically, comparing the city of Oviedo, Seminole County, and the state of Florida. Oviedo experienced its highest growth between 1990 and 2000, where its population went from roughly 11,000 to 26,000, an increase of 131%. Moving into 2000 and beyond, that rate slowed somewhat, but the city's population still has gone from 11,000 in 1990 to over 40,000 as of 2020. In each of those decades, it grew faster than the state of Florida, which has been recognized to have extraordinary growth. As part of this plan, we didn't look at just the city, but we also looked at potential areas that could either annex into the future or where people travel to and from in the surrounding areas. The study area includes all the unincorporated areas down to the Orange County line. It also includes areas up to Florida Avenue and to 419 out to the east, and includes roughly the city limits of Winter Springs and the Oviedo Mall. So the analysis, the city's mobility plan includes projects outside of the city limits. It's also going to have an impact from development that occurs. Either that development annexes into the city in the future or it's approved by the county. Either way, it's going to have an impact on the transportation system. And so we looked at what's the growth in that community, in that mobility study area over the next 22 years out to 2045. The growth is expected to be roughly 27% during that time frame, which is higher than the county, but it's roughly in line with the state of Florida. And that's still fairly significant growth over the next 20 plus years of over 25%. We also looked at projected growth in vehicle miles of travel. This is how long cars stay on the roadway. Within the study area, it's expected to grow by 37% by 2045. The state of Florida is growing by 29%. Again, that's fairly extraordinary growth, and that's one of the reasons that the city needs both the mobility plan and a fully adopted mobility fee to help pay for that new growth. The mobility plan included a number of factors. I'm not going to go into each one of these. They're detailed in the technical report, but it does go into an analysis that shows, one, that there's a need for new growth or new transportation improvements to serve new growth, and that new growth is not paying more than its share of the overall cost of the mobility plan projects. And each one of these factors is detailed in over a 200-page technical report. One of the biggest factors beyond moving to a improvements-based plan and identifying future projects is the significant inflation that's occurred since the COVID-19 pandemic. And just between the second quarter of 2020, which is really the start of the pandemic, to the second quarter of 2023, which is roughly the time frame when the study was completed, inflation increased by over 50%. And this has had a significant impact in terms of the city's ability to fund transportation improvements. And while the rate of inflation has slowed down somewhat, it is still increasing at a faster rate than historically it has been. And the final two factors are part of the mobility fee discussion itself. Again, the study area. A mobility fee is also an assessment on new development. So that assessment is primarily within the city of Oviedo. And then should areas within the city or surrounding portions of the city annex in the future, the city would then assess its mobility fee on new development in that area. And this is the extent of that assessment area and also the study area for the mobility fee. There's also another component that's known as a benefit district. The assessment area is where the fees are assessed and collected from new development. The benefit district is where they're spent. So they're primarily spent within the city of Oviedo, but there are also projects that are outside of city limits, many of them on county and state roads, and the mobility fee is designed to allow the city to make contributions to the state or to the county to advance some of those projects identified in the mobility fee. In mobility plan. Without this, the city could just expend the money within city limits, but because the mobility study area includes this entire area, we've identified it as expenditures for future projects. This is a technical report that details both the mobility plan and the mobility fee. It's 200 pages in length. There's a lot of detail, but everything that we've discussed today and the fee calculations themselves are documented in this report, which is one of the requirements for a finding of extraordinary circumstances and one of the findings and one of the needs to adopt a plan and a mobility fee. We also looked at an evaluation of where trips start and where trips end within Seminole County with a primary focus on the mobility study area. The area that you see in yellow is the mobility study area. The area in green, which is the city limits, and the area in red is some of the zones which extend outside of both of those. A portion of that zone in zone 43 is largely conservation in nature, so there's really not a lot of trips being generated from there, but the extent of the zone goes out to that far. And what we found is largely the city of Oviedo functions as a downtown for Eastern Seminole County. It means there are a lot of members of the community, businesses, residents within Eastern Seminole County that travel to and from the city of Oviedo on a daily basis. Roughly 50% of all trips that start in the city of Oviedo end in the city of Oviedo, meaning they don't leave the city limits, they don't go out onto the county network, they don't go down into Seminole County or other portions of Seminole County or Orange County. They stay local to the community. 18% of the travel is from the city of Oviedo down into Orange County. That equates to roughly 67%. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the city itself functions as a downtown. So that area that you see in both the red and or the blue area 94% of all those trips that occur there stay within this area and go to and from the city of Oviedo. So really, the city of Oviedo is functioning as Eastern Seminole County's downtown. In terms of the mobility fee, one of the reasons we're going through this whole process is if the fees increase greater than a certain percentage, they're either limited and phased in, or there needs to be a finding of extraordinary circumstance. One of the unique factors of this fee is it is replacing the city's existing road impact fee and the county's mobility fee. So we had to calculate what the fee would be from the city plus the county as sort of our baseline to determine what it would increase in the future. The mobility fee is structured to be a even rate for all types of residential uses, regardless of whether or not it's a townhome, a villa, a single-family home, an apartment. They all pay the same rate per square foot. So just in terms of what's commonly used as a metric is 1,000 square foot of a residential unit, the mobility fee would be $2,728, which is a reduction over the current fee calculation for single-family residential use. But when you look at combining the city's impact fee and the county's impact fee for a 1,000 square foot dwelling unit, this would be a 1,000 square foot single-family dwelling unit. The city and the county's fees both have lower rates for multifamily uses, so there's not a whole lot of 1,000 square foot single-family homes being built. But if there was one being built, they would pay $3,800. If the city had a home come in that was 1,000 square feet, the mobility fee would be 28% less. More realistically, within the city of Oviedo, homes are generally 2,000 square feet and above. So a 2,200 square foot house would pay a combined mobility fee of $6,000. Under the existing city impact fee and the county mobility fee, that fee would be $4,358. That's an increase of roughly 37%. If the city didn't make a finding of extraordinary circumstances, that 37% would have to be phased in over a 4-year period. Likewise, for a 2,700 square foot single family home, the mobility fee would be $7,500. Under the existing fees today, it would be $5,200, and that is an increase of 42%. Once you get above 3,000 square feet, the fee increases by more than 50%. So essentially, the city would be limited in terms of the maximum rate it could charge under statute at 50%, and then any increase above 25% would have to be phased in over a 4-year period. With inflation averaging roughly 10% plus a year, that's a potential for inflation to increase 40% over the 4-year phase-in period. So really, it is essential for the city to consider adopting rates at their fully calculated value today so that they can actually keep up with inflation as it continues to grow. For townhomes, the mobility fee for a 1,500 square foot townhome would be $4,000. Under the city impact fee and the county mobility fee, it would be $2,800. That's an increase of 45%. For a 1,000 square foot apartment dwelling unit, the city and county's fees today are $2,000 roughly. Under the mobility fee, they would be $2,728, or roughly a 30% increase. As you can see, each one of the county and city impact fee numbers change based on the type of use. The city's mobility fee is the same, $2,728 per 1,000 square feet. So it makes it really simple to calculate, really easy to understand, and also really easy to implement. But it does also result in increases that are above what those are today and would have to be phased in per statute. The city has included a affordable residential category, which is permitted by Florida statute. the city would need to develop criteria, and I believe they have some already for affordable residential. They would need to apply that to mobility fees. But the affordable residential rate, which the county has today in its mobility fee, but the city does not have in its impact fee, it results in actually a 44% reduction. So that's actually one of the few fees that's going down compared to today. The mobility fee for a hotel is projected to increase by 41%, and for a mobile home residence, which the city really doesn't have a whole lot of, it would increase by 97%. For community serving uses, such as places of worship, performing arts venues, places of assembly, the mobility fees of 45% increase. For long-term care, which is assisted living facilities or nursing homes, it would increase by 24%. And for private schools, it would increase roughly by 15%. Public schools and charter schools are exempt from impact fees and mobility fees per Florida statute. So this would just apply to daycares and private education uses. For industrial fees, the increase is not that much. There's a new outdoor commercial recreation. Think of tennis courts or ball fields that actually charged for their use. There is a new category for that. Indoor commercial recreation, a trampoline park, a gym, a dance studio is a slight decrease over the existing rates. The office mobility fee increases by roughly 32%, and medical offices increase by 19%. So as you see in all these numbers, the percentages vary fairly significantly. And so some of these would have to be phased in over a 2-year period, some of them would have to be phased over a 4-year period, and others would have to be capped at 50%. The city has also developed a program for small retail businesses, which are more local, community-based businesses. The city would need to define criteria for that. There were a number of programs across the state developed during the COVID pandemic to help out small businesses, and that's sort of where this concept came from. And the city, if they want to move forward with this and establish a program, could enact a fee that would be smaller for local-based businesses. The retail mobility fee for standard retail use is roughly the same. And part of that is because the mobility fee has changed out or switched out high-impact retail uses such as banks, pharmacies, restaurants, supermarkets, which have a much greater impact up to 86% above the existing rates, as does convenience retail. Convenience retail and supermarkets are both impacted by the ITE, or Institute of Transportation Engineers, trip generation manual change. So that was a pretty extraordinary difference between the old fees and the new fees today. And finally, the mobility fee includes a category for quick service restaurants or fast food restaurants per drive-through lane, and also banks. Both banks and fast food restaurants are getting smaller, but they're also adding standalone drive-through either ATM machines or adding additional drive-through lanes. Think of a Chick-fil-A with their 2 lanes. There are some communities in Florida that are experiencing fast food developments that feature actually 4 drive-through lanes. So this mobility fee would now assess a fee for that per drive-through. There's a new fee for car washes, which are popping up throughout the community. There's an increase in mobility fees for vehicle fueling. Part of that is because of the ITE trip generation rate. The one fee that is a little bit lower is for the service of motor vehicles, such as tire repair or quick lube. So with that, just to recap, extraordinary circumstances, each one of those fees that I've highlighted, if they're above 50%, they can't be increased more than that today. If the increase in fees is less than 25%, it has to be phased in over 2 years. If it's between 25% and 50%, has to be phased in over a 4-year period unless there is a finding of extraordinary circumstances. One of those requirements is the needs study, which is both the technical report and the extraordinary circumstances study. That study cannot be older than 12 months. Neither of those are. There are 2 public hearings that need to be held, and there is a supermajority vote of the city council that's required. And so just in conclusion, the study that we've prepared and will be available on the city's website, the city of Oviedo has experienced over the past 30 years growth that is extraordinary and has exceeded that of the state of Florida. Within the time frame that we're looking at between 2020 and 2045, the study area population will continue to grow as fast as the state of Florida, if not exceed that of Florida. Florida has been found to have extraordinary growth. That is an extraordinary circumstance. There's also extraordinary projected growth in vehicle miles of travel within the study area that's greater than the state of Florida. The mobility fee is based on a detailed needs analysis and the need specifically for multimodal projects to accommodate growth in the study area. It's documented in the technical report. New growth is not being charged more than its fair share. And this is a big change from the current fee that just says a home generates traffic. That traffic needs so many miles of roadway to accommodate it. Here's their fee. Under this mobility plan, mobility fee, there are very specific projects aimed directly at new growth in terms of what their share of the cost is. So that's quite a big difference and an extraordinary change from how the current fee is calculated, and it is in keeping with current Florida statute. There's been a marked increase in inflation since the COVID-19 pandemic. That's increased more than 50% and is projected to continue to increase. Should the city phase in its fees, those fees would be able to pay for less and less of the future growth and the future need for transportation improvements. The city's mobility fee does include programs to provide a lower rate for affordable housing, for small businesses, and for mixed-use development within the city. And finally, there are several land uses that, because of changes to the ITE trip generation, that are beyond the control of the city, and these are nationally recognized studies. Those have resulted in fees that exceed the 50% cap in Florida statute. Had the city's prior impact fee or the county's mobility fee been based on the same trip generation manual, those percentages would not have exceeded 50% because they would have been more in line with what those new rates are. So that is an extraordinary change from where the current fees are to where the fees are today. So our recommendation is that the City Council should adopt the mobility fee at the fully calculated rate based on the findings documented in the extraordinary circumstances study dated April 2024 and the data and analysis in the 2045 mobility plan and mobility fee technical report dated September 2023, both of which were prepared by New Urban Concepts. This will be the first workshop. There will also be a second workshop this evening. This presentation has been live streamed for members of the public. It will also is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the city's website. And there'll be contact information for city staff should members of the public have any questions or request a copy of either the technical report or the extraordinary circumstance study. Once we've concluded the workshop and we've received feedback from the community, we will then move forward with development and update of the city's ordinances to allow for a mobility fee, and we'll present this to the City Council for a first reading, I believe sometime in May, and then looking potentially for an adoption hearing sometime in June or July, depending on schedules this year. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I don't see any members of the public available here today. at the workshop, but if there are members that would like to reach out, the contact information is available on the city's website. This presentation is recorded and available for viewing, and we'd be happy to respond to any questions. On the screen itself is my contact information. If any members of the public or the development community have any questions on either the mobility fee or the extraordinary circumstances. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and we thank you for viewing, and we are available afterwards to answer any questions. Thank you very much.